He dumped her for choosing military service over marriage, until two little boys wearing "My Mom is My Hero" shirts revealed a secret that turned his billions into worthless paper. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Jennifer Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the Upper East Side penthouse, watching Manhattan glitter beneath her like a jewelry box spilled open. Snow was falling gently, adding a soft haze to the city lights. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, still unable to believe this was her life now, a world away from the modest San Diego neighborhood where she'd grown up. Admiring the view again? Blake Donovan's voice came from behind her, smooth as the 18-year-old Scotch he preferred. Jennifer turned to see her fiancé adjusting his custom Tom Ford cufflinks, his tall frame impeccably dressed for their dinner reservation. At 30, Blake carried himself with the assurance of someone who had never known limitation, the heir to Donovan Enterprises and its youngest CEO, his face a fixture in business magazines and society pages alike. "It still doesn't seem real sometimes," she admitted, twisting the 3-carat diamond engagement ring that felt heavy on her finger even after 2 months. Blake crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her waist, his reflection joining hers in the window. "Better get used to it. This is just the beginning." He kissed her neck. "The car will be here in 5 minutes." As he moved away to check his phone, Jennifer's gaze drifted to her handbag, where the letter from the Marine Corps recruitment office lay hidden. She'd applied months ago before meeting Blake, driven by the desire to follow in her late father's footsteps. The acceptance had arrived yesterday, and she still hadn't found the courage to mention it. Tonight, she promised herself. Tonight, at dinner. 11 Madison Park glowed with understated elegance as the maitre d' led them to a prime corner table. Jennifer felt the familiar flutter of self-consciousness as heads turned to watch their passage. After 8 months in New York, she still wasn't accustomed to the attention that came with being on Blake Donovan's arm. "Mr. Donovan, so good to see you again," the maitre d' purred. "Your usual table is ready." Blake nodded with the casual entitlement of someone who expected nothing less than perfection. A sommelier appeared immediately to discuss wine options, while Jennifer sat quietly, studying the other diners. At a nearby table, she recognized a famous actress with her director husband. At another, a tech billionaire she'd seen on magazine covers. "They're all wondering what my secret is," Blake said after the sommelier departed, his eyes fixed on Jennifer. "Secret?" she asked, reaching for her water glass. "How I managed to find the one genuine person in a city of social climbers." His smile was warm, reminding her of why she'd fallen for him despite their differences. "That first night at the charity gala, when you called out that hedge fund manager for his comments about homeless veterans, I knew you were different." Jennifer smiled at the memory. "I'm pretty sure I nearly got you blacklisted from his investment circle." "Worth it," Blake said, raising his wine glass. "To authenticity, the rarest commodity in Manhattan." As they clinked glasses, Jennifer's fingers instinctively went to her engagement ring, twisting it nervously. The weight of her unshared news pressed against her chest. Their appetizers arrived, artfully plated creations that looked more like architecture than food. Jennifer took a deep breath. "It was now or never. Blake, there's something I need to tell you." He looked up, his jade-green eyes focusing on her with the intensity that had helped him close billion-dollar deals before his 30th birthday. "I applied to the Marines several months ago before we met. I got my acceptance letter yesterday." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Blake's expression didn't change, but she saw something shift behind his eyes, like a door closing. "The Marines?" he finally said, placing his fork down with precise control. "You're joking." "No." Jennifer straightened her shoulders. "It's something I've always wanted to do. My father was a Marine. Yes, I remember the story." Blake dabbed his mouth with his napkin, the gesture meticulous. "Jennifer, People like us don't join the military. We support it through donations and gala fundraisers. People like us? She felt a chill despite the restaurant's perfect temperature. My wife is not going to be crawling through mud while I'm building an empire. His tone was matter-of-fact, as though discussing a business decision. It's simply not compatible with our life. Jennifer felt her cheeks flush. I thought you admired my authenticity and principles. In appropriate contexts, yes. Blake signaled for more wine. There are other ways to honor your father's memory that don't involve throwing away the opportunities I'm offering you. The conversation was veering into dangerous territory, but Jennifer couldn't back down now. Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen. There's more, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm pregnant. Blake froze, wine glass halfway to his lips. For a moment, genuine shock replaced his carefully controlled expression. Pregnant? He repeated, setting down his glass. How far along? 6 weeks. The calculation was visible in his eyes. They'd been engaged for 8 weeks, dating for 6 months before that. A child? Now? His voice had dropped to ensure their privacy, but the intensity burned through his whispered words. Jennifer, people like us don't sacrifice ambitions for children. They're anchors for people with vision. Jennifer stared at him, struggling to recognize the man she thought she'd agreed to marry. I thought you'd be happy. We're engaged. We're starting a life together. We're building an empire, he corrected. Children come later, after the foundation is secure, with proper planning and professional care. Professional care? She repeated, the words feeling hollow in her mouth. Blake leaned forward, his voice clinical. There are discreet clinics that handle these situations for people in our position. I'll have my assistant make the arrangements. Jennifer felt as though she'd been slapped. Around them, dinner conversations continued. Silverware clinked against fine china, and somewhere in the restaurant, someone laughed. You want me to get rid of our baby? The words felt surreal, leaving her lips. I want us to make a rational decision about timing, he countered smoothly. And this Marine Corps fantasy, that needs to end now. I've worked too hard building the Donovan name to have it associated with military service. He spoke the last 2 words as though they were distasteful, and something broke inside Jennifer. She saw with sudden clarity the man beneath the expensive suit and practiced charm. With trembling fingers, she began twisting the engagement ring off her finger. What are you doing? Blake's voice sharpened. Being authentic, she answered, finally working the ring free. She placed it on the marble tabletop with a soft clink that somehow sounded final. Blake stared at the ring, then back at her. His handsome face hardened into something unrecognizable as he reached for the diamond, pocketing it smoothly. You clearly don't have what it takes to be a Donovan, he said. Someone who chooses combat boots over Louboutins would never understand the legacy I'm building. Jennifer felt tears welling but refused to let them fall in this public place, aware of the surreptitious glances from neighboring tables. Blake pulled out his wallet and tossed several $100 bills onto the table, far more than necessary for their barely touched appetizers. Use this to solve your problem. His smile turned cynical. It's the last charity you'll receive from me. Go back to your insignificant San Diego. In Manhattan, you're just another girl with dreams bigger than your potential. He stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Don't bother returning to the apartment. I'll have your things shipped to whatever address you provide my assistant. Without another glance, Blake walked away, already pulling out his phone, his posture betraying no sign of the emotional carnage he'd left behind. Jennifer sat frozen, silent tears finally escaping down her cheeks. The waiter approached cautiously, then retreated with a sympathetic nod. At nearby tables, diners pretended not to have witnessed her humiliation, though she could feel their sideways glances. She placed her hands protectively over her still flat abdomen. We're not insignificant, she whispered. The promise, feeling like the only solid thing in a world, suddenly turned liquid beneath her feet. 3 weeks later, Jennifer stood in a tiny San Diego apartment that smelled of mildew and the previous tenant's cigarettes. The place was barely furnished, just a second-hand mattress on the floor, a wobbly table, and a single chair. Through the thin walls, she could hear the rumble of freight trains that would wake her throughout the night. Her call to the Marine Corps recruiting office had been difficult but necessary. They agreed to hold her application for reconsideration after her pregnancy, though the officer's tone suggested her chances were significantly diminished. A wave of nausea, morning sickness that ironically struck hardest in late afternoon, forced her to sit on the single chair. Jennifer had already been sick twice during her shift at the medical clinic where she'd found work as a receptionist. In 3 hours, she would need to be at the diner for her evening waitressing job. On the rickety table lay a tabloid magazine someone had left in the clinic's waiting room. A small article in the corner caught her eye. Donovan dumps gold digger. The grainy photo showed her leaving 11 Madison Park that night, face tear-streaked. Jennifer pushed the magazine away and opened her laptop, the one possession she'd refused to leave behind in New York. She pulled up the community college website, studying the night courses in computer science. Programming had always interested her, and the field offered stable employment prospects. The cost of tuition stared back at her from the screen. Even with 3 jobs, receptionist by day, waitress by night, and weekend data entry work she'd just secured, the numbers wouldn't add up. Her gaze fell on the Cartier watch Blake had given her for her 23rd birthday. "Every minute with you is precious," he'd said then, in what now seemed like a line he'd rehearsed for previous girlfriends. Decision made, Jennifer stood up, fighting another wave of nausea. She would sell the watch tomorrow. It would cover tuition, and maybe even a proper bed. As darkness fell outside her single window, Jennifer opened a can of soup and sat cross-legged on the mattress, balancing her laptop on her knees. As she scrolled through job listings that might accommodate her growing belly in the coming months, a flicker of determination sparked within her. Blake Donovan thought he'd discarded something insignificant. One day, he would realize just how wrong he had been. 15 years later, when Blake Donovan nervously adjusted his $1,200 Brioni tie before meeting the mysterious Major Hayes Montgomery, who would control his company's fate, he had no idea he was about to face the insignificant woman he had abandoned. Jennifer's tears had dried by the time she reached the sidewalk outside 11 Madison Park, the night air slapping her face like a second rejection. A doorman hailed a taxi, his eyes carefully avoiding hers, professional discretion masking what must have been pity. Inside the cab, she gave the driver the address of the Upper East Side apartment. No, Blake's apartment, she corrected herself. It wasn't her home anymore. It never had been. "Change of plans," she said suddenly. "Take me to the Marriott on Lexington, please." In the hotel room that cost more than she could afford, Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. 27 missed calls from friends she'd made in New York. Blake's friends, really. They must have heard already. Manhattan's elite social circle transmitted gossip faster than fiber optic cables. She dialed Blake's number, her finger trembling. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. On the 4th attempt, his assistant answered. "Mr. Donovan's office. I need to speak with Blake. It's Jennifer." A pause. "I'm sorry, Ms. Hayes. Mr. Donovan has instructed that he doesn't wish to have further contact. If you'd like to provide a shipping address for your belongings—" "Put him on the phone," Jennifer interrupted, her voice cracking. "He can't just— We need to talk about the baby." "I've been authorized to provide contact information for a private clinic that handles these situations discreetly," the assistant continued, her voice mechanical. "They're very professional and—" Jennifer hung up, bile rising in her throat. The next morning, she presented her key card at the apartment building. The doorman, different from the night regular, shook his head apologetically. "I'm sorry, miss. Your access has been revoked. Mr. Donovan's instructions. My clothes, my things? If you'll provide an address, everything will be shipped within 24 hours. Jennifer stood in the marble lobby, acutely aware of her wrinkled dress from the night before. A woman in designer workout clothes glanced at her with undisguised curiosity as she passed. "Fine," Jennifer said, writing down her parents' old address in San Diego. "Send it there." 3 days later, she sat in economy class, knees pressed against the seat in front of her, watching Manhattan recede beneath her. 8 months ago, she'd flown into this city on Blake's private jet, champagne in hand, heart full of possibilities. Now she left with 2 carry-on bags and a first-class heartbreak in economy accommodations. At the newsstand in San Diego International, a tabloid caught her eye. "Donovan dumps gold digger." Beneath the headline was a blurry photo of her leaving the restaurant, face streaked with tears. The caption read, "Unnamed source says she tried to trap billionaire with pregnancy claim." Jennifer's hands shook as she paid for the magazine, ignoring the cashier's curious look as recognition dawned on his face. Her parents' old house had new owners, a young couple with a toddler who looked confused when she asked if any packages had arrived for her. 3 more days in a budget motel depleted her savings further while she hunted for an apartment she could afford. The place she finally found was in a neighborhood her father would have forbidden her to visit after dark. Freight train tracks ran behind the building, and the walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television as if it were in her own room. The landlord eyed her warily when she paid the deposit in cash. "No parties, no drugs, no trouble," he warned, handing over a single key. "And rent's due on the 1st. No exceptions." Jennifer nodded, too exhausted to be offended. That night she slept on the floor, using her coat as a pillow, lulled into fitful dreams by the rumble of passing trains. The next morning brought another wave of nausea that left her huddled over the rust-stained toilet. Afterward, she splashed water on her face and stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. "You need a job. 3 jobs, actually." The clinic hired her first, a small medical office where the manager recognized her father's name. "He treated my mother's arthritis for years," the woman said. "Start Monday, 8 to 5, front desk." The diner came next, evening shifts from 6 to midnight. The manager barely looked at her application before handing her an apron. "Tips are pooled. Don't be late." By the end of her first week back in San Diego, Jennifer had added weekend data entry work she could do from her apartment. Her body protested the brutal schedule, feet swelling in cheap shoes, back aching from hours of sitting at poorly designed workstations, stomach rebelling against the quick meals eaten between shifts. When her belongings finally arrived from New York, the boxes had been opened and roughly repacked. Several designer dresses were missing, along with her jewelry box. A note from Blake's assistant stated coldly that items purchased by Mr. Donovan have been retained. Jennifer sat among the scattered remnants of her brief Manhattan life and allowed herself 10 minutes of tears. Then she stood, wiped her eyes, and began sorting what she could sell. 3 weeks into her new routine, she called the Marine Corps recruiting office. "Hayes, Jennifer," she said when asked for her name. "I was accepted to OCS, but I need to defer. I'm pregnant." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "I understand this impacts my candidacy," she continued, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I'd like to be reconsidered after the baby is born." "That's unusual," the officer finally responded. "Your file will be noted, but I can't make any promises." That night, Jennifer sobbed into her pillow, mourning the life she'd planned before Blake, before the pregnancy. She allowed herself this one night of weakness, of what-ifs and might-have-beens. In the morning, she rose before dawn, dressed in the dark, and went to work. The days blurred together, receptionist smiles for irritable patients, waitress pleasantries for demanding diners, numbers entered into databases until her vision blurred. Her small apartment remained sparsely furnished, just a second-hand mattress, a wobbly table, and a single chair. Every spare dollar went into an account labeled Future. At 12 weeks, her uniform at the diner grew tight across her abdomen. The manager frowned but said nothing when she used a safety pin to expand the waistband. "Honey, you need to eat more," said Marge, a 60-something waitress with nicotine-stained fingers and kind eyes. "You're feeding too now." Jennifer didn't correct her assumption that she was simply not eating enough. The truth, that she was working 16-hour days and living on ramen noodles to save money, seemed too pitiful to voice aloud. When a customer recognized her from the tabloid story, whispers followed her through the restaurant. "That's her, the one the billionaire dumped." She held her head high, took their orders, and doubled her determination to disappear from any narrative controlled by Blake Donovan. At 20 weeks, Jennifer sat alone in a clinic examination room, waiting for her ultrasound. The technician, a woman not much older than herself, squirted cold gel on her exposed belly. "First baby?" she asked cheerfully. "Yes," Jennifer answered, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Dad couldn't make it today?" Jennifer swallowed. "There is no dad." The technician's cheerfulness dimmed slightly, but her professionalism remained intact as she moved the wand across Jennifer's abdomen. "Oh!" she exclaimed suddenly. "Well, this explains why you're showing more than expected. There are 2 babies in there." "2?" Jennifer's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Twins. Would you like to know the sex?" Jennifer nodded, unable to form words. "Both boys, from what I can see. Healthy development, strong heartbeats. 2 boys, 2 babies. Twice the responsibility, twice the cost, twice the challenge for a single mother working 3 jobs and living in an apartment barely big enough for one person." That night, sitting on her floor eating instant noodles, Jennifer placed her hand on her growing belly and felt a fierce determination take root. "You deserve better than this," she whispered to her unborn sons. "Much better." The next morning, Jennifer walked into a pawn shop with the Cartier watch Blake had given her for her 23rd birthday. The shopkeeper's eyes widened slightly at the luxury item. "Special occasion gift?" he asked, examining it under a loupe. "Something like that," Jennifer replied. With the money from the watch, far less than its actual value but enough, she paid for night classes in computer science at the local community college. For the next 3 months, she added studying to her impossible schedule, sleeping just 3 hours a night, refusing to surrender to exhaustion. She studied during breaks at the clinic, between orders at the diner, and in the pre-dawn hours when insomnia struck. The trains that rattled her windows became timepieces marking her determination. Another hour of study completed, another step away from the woman Blake had dismissed as insignificant. At 32 weeks, her body finally rebelled. Jennifer fainted during her shift at the diner, collapsing between tables 7 and 9, tray of appetizers crashing to the floor. She woke in the hospital, a concerned doctor checking her blood pressure. "Extreme exhaustion and dehydration," he said sternly. "This isn't just about you anymore. Those babies need you healthy." Jennifer nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I'm doing everything I can." "Do you have family who can help? Anyone?" She shook her head. Her parents were gone, father to cancer, mother to a stroke the year after. No siblings. The friends she'd had before Blake had scattered to post-college lives across the country. 2 days later, after being discharged with strict instructions to reduce her workload, Jennifer found a letter waiting in her mailbox. The Marine Corps emblem made her heart skip. Inside was a brief note acknowledging her situation and expressing continued interest in her candidacy following her recovery from childbirth. That same afternoon, her former high school English teacher, Mrs. Montgomery, appeared at her door. "Jennifer Hayes," the elegant 70-year-old said, surveying the sparse apartment with sharp eyes. "I heard through the grapevine you were back in town and in a difficult situation." Jennifer hadn't seen Mrs. Montgomery since graduation. The woman had been formidable then, demanding perfect essays and intellectual rigor, and appeared unchanged by the years. "May I come in?" she asked, though she was already stepping through the doorway. "We have things to discuss." Mrs. Montgomery, now Jennifer learned, was the widow of a state senator. Childless and wealthy, she had kept tabs on promising students over her 40-year teaching career. "I've been following your situation," she said bluntly, settling into Jennifer's single chair. "Not the tabloid nonsense, but the real circumstances. You need help, and I'm in a position to provide it." Jennifer's pride warred with necessity. "I don't want charity." "Good, because I'm not offering it." Mrs. Montgomery's eyes were keen. "I'm proposing an investment in potential. You were the brightest student I ever taught, Jennifer. I won't watch that potential wasted because some Manhattan playboy couldn't recognize quality when he had it." By the time she left, they had an arrangement. Mrs. Montgomery would help with childcare after the babies were born, allowing Jennifer to continue her education and eventually pursue her military ambition. In return, Jennifer would, in Mrs. Montgomery's words, "fulfill every ounce of the potential I always saw in you." It wasn't salvation, but it was hope. Something Jennifer had been running dangerously low on. When Lucas and Logan were born 6 weeks later, tiny, identical boys with startling jade-green eyes that were unmistakably Blake's, Jennifer held them in her arms and made a solemn promise. One day, he'll see who was truly insignificant at that table, and it won't be us. As Jennifer struggled to keep her eyes open during her third shift of the day, she couldn't have predicted that in 15 years she would be standing on a bright stage, with medals on her chest, deciding the financial fate of the man who had discarded her as insignificant. The twins arrived 3 weeks early, their eagerness to enter the world matching the fierce determination that had sustained Jennifer through her pregnancy. The labor was mercifully quick but intensely painful, her body exhausted from months of overwork and stress. "Push!" the nurse encouraged as Jennifer gripped the sides of the hospital bed, her knuckles white with effort. Mrs. Montgomery stood beside her, a steady presence in the storm of pain. When the first cry pierced the delivery room, Jennifer felt a surge of emotion so powerful it momentarily eclipsed her exhaustion. Minutes later, the second cry joined in harmony, and she knew her world had irrevocably changed. "2 healthy boys," the doctor announced, placing the tiny swaddled bundles in her arms. Jennifer gazed down at their identical faces, still red and wrinkled from birth. As if sensing her scrutiny, both babies opened their eyes simultaneously, revealing irises of a startling jade green, Blake's eyes unmistakably his, staring back at her from these innocent faces. "They have his eyes," she whispered, tears tracking down her cheeks. Mrs. Montgomery squeezed her shoulder. "But they'll have your heart. That's what matters." In the quiet hours that followed as the twins slept in clear bassinets beside her hospital bed, Jennifer alternated between overwhelming love and paralyzing fear. She had created a birth plan, budget projections, and childcare schedules, but the reality of 2 dependent lives now entrusted to her care made all her preparations seem woefully inadequate. "I've named them," she told Mrs. Montgomery when the older woman returned with a cup of decent coffee smuggled from outside the hospital. "Lucas and Logan." "Strong names," Mrs. Montgomery approved, settling into the visitor's chair. "Have you called him?" Jennifer shook her head. "There's no point. He made his choice." "His loss," Mrs. Montgomery said with finality, effectively closing the subject. 3 days later, Jennifer brought the twins home to her tiny apartment. The space, barely adequate for one person, now felt impossibly cramped with the addition of 2 second-hand cribs wedged against opposite walls. Mrs. Montgomery had helped clean and prepare the apartment, but nothing could disguise its fundamental inadequacy as a nursery. That first night alone with the twins was a baptism by fire. Logan cried whenever Jennifer put him down, while Lucas developed hiccups that seemed immune to all remedies. By dawn, Jennifer sat cross-legged on the floor between the cribs, one baby cradled in each arm, all 3 of them finally asleep as the first freight train of the morning rattled the thin windows. The days blurred into an endless cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and brief naps, snatched in the moments when both babies miraculously slept simultaneously. Jennifer's body, still recovering from childbirth, protested the demands placed upon it. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under her eyes, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame as the pregnancy weight melted away too quickly. Mrs. Montgomery appeared every morning at 8, shooing Jennifer toward the shower while taking charge of the twins with surprising competence for someone who'd never had children of her own. "I taught teenagers for 40 years, she explained when Jennifer expressed her gratitude. "Compared to that, these two are manageable." This daily respite allowed Jennifer to maintain her receptionist job at the clinic, where her boss had generously held her position during her short maternity leave. The diner and data entry work had to be abandoned, but the reduced income was partially offset by the assistance Mrs. Montgomery provided, not just childcare, but occasional groceries and second-hand baby clothes that mysteriously appeared in the apartment. When the twins were 3 months old, Jennifer received an unexpected visit from her landlord. The man shifted uncomfortably in the doorway, avoiding eye contact. "Look, I didn't know about the babies when you moved in," he began awkwardly. "Studio apartments aren't zoned for families," Jennifer finished for him, her heart sinking. "How long do we have?" 30 days, he said, looking genuinely regretful. "I'd give you more time if I could, but the building inspector's been around and—" That night, after the twins were asleep, Jennifer sat at her wobbly table with her laptop, searching desperately for affordable 2-bedroom apartments. The numbers refused to add up. Her single income barely covered rent on the studio, let alone something larger. When Mrs. Montgomery arrived the next morning, Jennifer was red-eyed from lack of sleep and worry. "We're being evicted," she explained, voice flat with exhaustion. "I can't afford anything larger, but the studio violates occupancy codes with the twins." Mrs. Montgomery listened without interruption, her posture ramrod straight as always. When Jennifer finished, the older woman nodded once, decisively. "You'll move into the guest house," she said, as if announcing the weather forecast. "Robert and I built it for his mother, but it's been empty since she passed 5 years ago. 1 bedroom, but spacious enough for the cribs, and the rent will be reasonable." Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford with 2 babies depending on her. "Thank you," she said simply. The guest house behind the Montgomerys' elegant colonial home was indeed spacious compared to the studio apartment. A living area with kitchenette, a proper bedroom, and a small bathroom with an actual bathtub instead of just a shower stall. Large windows overlooked a garden that Robert Montgomery tended with scientific precision, and for the first time since returning to San Diego, Jennifer felt she could breathe. The reduced rent and proximity to Mrs. Montgomery allowed Jennifer to enroll in evening computer programming classes at the community college. 3 nights a week, after putting the twins to bed, she would cross the garden to the main house where Mrs. Montgomery would keep watch over the sleeping babies while Jennifer attended classes from 6 to 9. "I don't know how to repay you for all this," Jennifer admitted one evening as she gathered her textbooks. "Excellence," Mrs. Montgomery replied simply. "That's the only repayment I require. Be excellent, Jennifer. Show the world, and yourself, what you're truly capable of." The classes were challenging, especially for a chronically sleep-deprived new mother, but Jennifer discovered she had a natural aptitude for programming logic. Her professor, Dr. Chen, noticed her talent despite her frequent yawns during lectures. "Mrs. Hayes," he said after class one evening, "your work shows remarkable promise. Have you considered pursuing this field professionally?" Jennifer smiled tiredly. "That's the plan, eventually. Right now I'm just trying to keep my head above water." "You're doing more than that," he corrected, handing back her latest assignment marked with an A+. "You're swimming quite impressively against the current." When the twins reached their 6-month milestone, Jennifer celebrated by splurging on a professional photography session. The resulting portraits, the boys in matching outfits, their jade green eyes bright with curiosity, were framed and placed prominently in the guest house. She sent digital copies to the handful of friends who had maintained contact after her fall from Manhattan Grace, but deliberately did not forward them to Blake or anyone connected to him. Let him wonder, she thought. Let him live without knowing. One ordinary Tuesday, while Jennifer was at work, Mrs. Montgomery received an unexpected visitor. The elegant woman opened her front door to find a delivery man holding an enormous basket overflowing with baby products, premium diapers, organic formula, designer onesies, and high-end toys. "Delivery for Jennifer Hayes," the man announced, consulting his clipboard. Mrs. Montgomery's eyes narrowed slightly as she examined the card attached to the basket. It bore the Donovan Enterprises logo and a brief message. "Heard about the twins. Let me know if you need anything. B." Without hesitation, Mrs. Montgomery handed the basket back to the startled delivery man. "Return to sender," she said firmly. "The recipient does not wish to accept this." She never mentioned the incident to Jennifer. As the twins approached their first birthday, Jennifer found herself at another crossroads. Her computer programming courses were nearly complete, and she had maintained contact with the Marine Corps throughout the year. The recruiting officer had been cautiously encouraging about her prospects for officer candidate school, pending her physical readiness assessment. "You've kept one foot in the civilian world and one in preparation for service," Mrs. Montgomery observed one evening as they watched the twins play on a blanket in the garden. "The time is coming when you'll need to choose your path." Jennifer nodded, watching Lucas determinedly stack blocks while Logan systematically knocked them down, both boys already showing distinct personalities despite their identical appearance. "I still want to serve," she admitted. "My father was so proud of his Marine Corps service. I feel like it's unfinished business. And the boys?" Jennifer looked at the woman who had become far more than a landlady or former teacher, who had, in fact, become the closest thing to family she had left. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Jennifer said carefully. "If I were accepted to OCS, would you consider—" "We would care for them as our own," Mrs. Montgomery answered before Jennifer could finish the question. "Robert is already besotted with them, though he'd never admit it, and I find I've grown rather attached myself." 2 months later, Jennifer stood in her dress uniform, having just sworn her oath as a Marine Corps officer candidate. The ceremony was small but significant, marking the official beginning of her military career. Mrs. Montgomery and Senator Montgomery attended with the twins, now toddling on unsteady legs and babbling in their private twin language. After the ceremony, Jennifer knelt to embrace her sons, inhaling their baby scent and committing it to memory. "Mama has to go away for a little while," she explained, knowing they couldn't possibly understand. "But I'll come back, and we'll build a better future together." As she handed the boys to the Montgomerys, entrusting them to the couple who had become their surrogate grandparents, Jennifer felt a complex mix of emotions: grief at the separation, determination to succeed, and profound gratitude for this unexpected family that had formed around her and her sons. As she boarded the bus that would take her to training, Jennifer gazed out the window at the diminishing figures of the Montgomerys holding her sons. She pressed her palm against the glass, a mirror of how she had once touched the window of Blake's Manhattan penthouse, marveling at the view. The views were different now, the dreams transformed, but the wonder remained. Wonder at how life's harshest rejections could sometimes lead to the most unexpected blessings. As she handed her sons to the woman who would become their family by choice, Jennifer had no idea that this temporary separation would build the foundation for a future where Blake Donovan would beg to be part of the lives of the children he had rejected. The bus pulled away, taking Jennifer toward her new future while leaving her heart behind with 2 toddling boys. As the landscape of San Diego blurred past the window, she straightened her spine and wiped away the single tear she had allowed herself. This separation wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of everything she'd rebuild for her sons. Basic training stripped away every comfort Jennifer had ever known. Her first morning, She stood rigid as clippers buzzed against her scalp, watching her hair, once admired by Blake at Manhattan galas, fall in clumps around her boots. The woman in the mirror afterward was a stranger, head nearly shaved, face bare of makeup, eyes hard with determination. "Hayes!" the drill instructor barked. "You think this is a spa day? Move!" Jennifer moved. For the next 12 weeks, she ran until her lungs burned, crawled through mud that infiltrated every crevice of her uniform, and performed push-ups until her arms trembled uncontrollably. She learned to field-strip weapons, navigate by stars, and survive on minimal sleep, a skill she had inadvertently perfected during her twins' early months. Other recruits faltered. A woman from Oregon broke down sobbing during the third week, homesick for her boyfriend. A college athlete from Texas twisted his ankle and was recycled to the next training class. Jennifer endured, drawing strength from the memory of twin pairs of jade-green eyes. Each Sunday she was permitted a brief video call. Mrs. Montgomery would hold up the tablet, and Jennifer would drink in the sight of Lucas and Logan, growing visibly from week to week. "Mama!" Logan called during one call, recognizing her despite her transformed appearance. The single word pierced Jennifer's carefully maintained composure, nearly undoing her in front of her bunkmates. "They're walking properly now," Mrs. Montgomery reported. "Logan is talking more, but Lucas watches everything. The senator is teaching them to feed the koi in the garden pond." "Thank you," Jennifer whispered, the words woefully inadequate for the debt she owed this woman. At graduation, Jennifer stood tall in her dress uniform, now adorned with the insignia of a second lieutenant. The Montgomerys had traveled to witness the ceremony, bringing the twins, now 18 months old and bursting with energy. Lucas clung shyly to the senator's hand while Logan toddled boldly toward Jennifer, arms outstretched. She scooped him up, then knelt to embrace Lucas, who approached more cautiously. "I've missed you so much," she whispered into their identical curls. "The boys have missed you too," Senator Montgomery said, his formal demeanor softening as it always did around the twins. "But they've been well cared for." "Better than well," Jennifer acknowledged, noticing how healthy and happy they looked, dressed in matching outfits that were clearly of higher quality than she could have provided. Her first posting was at Camp Pendleton, close enough to San Diego that she could visit the twins on weekends. During those precious hours, she would lie on the floor of the guest house, allowing the boys to climb over her like a human jungle gym, memorizing their laughter. Between these moments of maternal joy, Jennifer devoted herself to mastering her military specialty. Her aptitude for technology had not gone unnoticed during basic training, and she had been assigned to a cybersecurity unit, a placement that aligned perfectly with her civilian studies. "Lieutenant Hayes," her commanding officer said after watching her identify a vulnerability during a system security exercise, "where did you learn to code like that?" "Community college, sir," she answered, while raising twins as a single mother. He raised an eyebrow. "Impressive multitasking, Lieutenant. We could use those skills here." During her scarce free time, Jennifer continued her education, enrolling in distance courses to complete her bachelor's degree in computer science. She studied in barracks at night, in mess halls during lunch breaks, and occasionally in her car between training exercises. "Do you ever rest, Hayes?" a fellow lieutenant asked, finding her reviewing encryption protocols at 3 in the morning. "I'll rest when my sons have the future they deserve," she replied without looking up. When the twins turned 3, Jennifer was granted leave to attend their birthday celebration, a small gathering in the Montgomerys' garden. The senator had built them a miniature playhouse that was nicer than Jennifer's first apartment. "You've given them stability," Jennifer told Mrs. Montgomery as they watched the boys unwrap presents. "I can never repay that." "Nonsense," the older woman replied. "You're giving them an example of perseverance and courage. That's worth more than comfort." Later that evening, as Jennifer helped clean up after the party, she glimpsed a magazine left open on the senator's desk. Blake Donovan's face stared up from the glossy page alongside the headline, Donovan empire expands amid personal turmoil. Divorce finalized. Jennifer's hand froze mid-reach. It was the first time she'd seen his face since that night at 11 Madison Park. He looked older, harder somehow, despite the professional styling and perfect suit. The article mentioned acrimonious divorce proceedings and allegations of emotional abuse from his model wife. "I wondered if you'd notice that," Mrs. Montgomery said from the doorway. "Robert subscribes to all the business publications. That one arrived yesterday." Jennifer straightened, surprised by the hollow feeling in her chest. "He looks tired," she said finally. "Living without integrity is exhausting," Mrs. Montgomery observed. "Now, would you like some tea before you head back to base?" 4 years into her military career, Jennifer received her promotion to first lieutenant, along with a commendation for developing a security protocol that had identified and neutralized a potential breach in communication systems. The ceremony was small but significant, recognition of her growing expertise in a critical field. The following weekend, during her regular visit with the twins, 5-year-old Logan asked the question Jennifer had been dreading. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like the other kids at school?" Jennifer set down the picture book they'd been reading. Lucas, always perceptive, looked up from his Lego creation, equally interested in the answer. "Some families have a mom and a dad," Jennifer explained carefully. "Some have 2 moms or 2 dads. Some, like ours, have one mom who loves you very much, and wonderful grandparents who help take care of you." "But where is our dad?" Logan pressed. "Did he die like Tommy's dad?" "No," Jennifer answered, deciding they deserved honesty, simplified for their age. "Your father and I knew each other a long time ago. Before you were born, he decided he didn't want to be a dad. He made a choice to not be part of our family." "Didn't he like us?" Lucas asked quietly, his first contribution to the conversation. Jennifer gathered both boys into her arms. "He never met you, and that was his mistake, the biggest mistake of his life. Because you two are the most amazing boys in the world." "We have Grandpa Robert," Logan declared after a moment's thought. "He teaches us chess and how to tie shoes." "Yes," Jennifer agreed, grateful for the senator's role in their lives. "You have something better than what other kids have. You have Grandpa Robert." When Jennifer was 29, her unit was deployed to a forward operating base in the Middle East. The 6-month separation from the twins was the hardest challenge she had faced since their birth. She marked their growth through video calls where they would excitedly show her school projects and recount playground adventures. It was during this deployment that Jennifer's military career took a decisive turn. A routine security check revealed an anomaly in communication systems that others had missed. Her discovery prevented sensitive information from being compromised and earned her the attention of senior officers. "Captain Murray wants to see you, Lieutenant," her sergeant informed her one sweltering afternoon. In the commander's air-conditioned office, Jennifer stood at attention until the captain gestured for her to sit. "That was impressive work, Hayes," he said without preamble. "You found a vulnerability that 3 security sweeps missed." "Thank you, sir." "Your file says you have twins back home," he continued, surprising her with the personal observation. "Yes, sir. They're 5. Must be hard being deployed away from them." Jennifer maintained her professional demeanor. "They're well cared for, sir. My focus is on my duties here." The captain nodded approvingly. "That's what I wanted to hear, because I'm recommending you for advanced cybersecurity training when we rotate back. It's an intensive 6-month program, minimal leave, but it would put you on track for early promotion and potentially more stable postings afterward." "I would be honored, sir," Jennifer replied without hesitation. Upon returning to the States, Jennifer was indeed selected for the specialized training program. The coursework was grueling, the expectations enormous, but she excelled, drawing on both her military discipline and her natural aptitude for systems thinking. One evening, while taking a rare break to catch up on news, Jennifer saw Blake Donovan featured on a business program. The segment highlighted Donovan Enterprises' expansion into military technology sectors. Blake, immaculately dressed as always, spoke confidently about revolutionizing defense capabilities through private sector innovation. "Our new security systems will protect America's most sensitive information," he claimed, looking directly into the camera. Donovan Enterprises is committed to becoming the government's most trusted partner in cybersecurity. Jennifer stared at the screen, an odd feeling settling in her stomach. The man who had once dismissed her military ambitions as beneath him was now positioning himself to profit from the very institution he had disdained. 2 months later, Jennifer completed her advanced training with distinction and received orders for her next assignment, the Pentagon, where she would join an elite team evaluating private contractor security protocols. The night before her departure for Washington, she sat in the Montgomery's garden with the senator, watching the twins chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "They're thriving," the senator observed. "You've given them stability despite the distance." "I've had help," Jennifer acknowledged. "More than help. You and Elizabeth have been parents to them when I couldn't be." The senator was quiet for a moment. "Jennifer, Elizabeth and I have been discussing something. The boys are 7 now, at an age where stability and legal certainty become increasingly important." Jennifer tensed, unsure where the conversation was heading. "We would like to formally adopt the boys," he continued gently. "Not to replace you, never that, but to give them our name, legal protection, and the certainty that they will always have a home here, regardless of your deployments." Jennifer looked at the elderly man who had become more father to her than her own had ever had the chance to be. "You want them to be Hayes Montgomerys?" "Only with your blessing," he assured her. "You would remain their mother in every way. This would simply provide an additional layer of security for their future." As Jennifer watched Lucas methodically collecting fireflies in a jar while Logan dramatically narrated their adventure, she felt a profound sense of rightness in the senator's proposal. "Yes," she said finally, "I think that would be perfect." While Jennifer progressed silently through the military ranks and the twins flourished under the values she and the senator instilled in them, Blake Donovan began directing his company toward government contracts, unaware that his path would lead him directly to the woman he had once called insignificant. Captain Jennifer Hayes stood at parade rest on the flight deck of the USS Ronald Reagan, watching fighter jets land with precise choreography as the aircraft carrier conducted operations in the Western Pacific. At 33, her career trajectory had exceeded even her own ambitious plans. The gold oak leaf insignia of her captain's rank caught the late afternoon sun, a tangible symbol of how far she'd come from that night at 11 Madison Park. "Captain Hayes, Admiral wants you in the CIC," her communications officer reported, interrupting her rare moment of solitude. In the Combat Information Center, screens displayed a cybersecurity breach in progress. Someone was probing the carrier group's communications network, testing for vulnerabilities with sophisticated persistence. "It began 20 minutes ago," the systems officer explained. "Pattern suggests state-sponsored actors." Jennifer's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes narrowing as she tracked the intrusion attempts. "They're using a tunneling protocol I haven't seen before, but the architecture is familiar." She initiated a countermeasure sequence of her own design, implemented across naval vessels 6 months earlier. "There, we've isolated them and created a false access point. They think they're getting in, but they're actually revealing their methods." Admiral Reeves, a career naval officer with salt-and-pepper hair, watched with undisguised approval. "Impressive work, Captain. That's twice this deployment you've caught something our automated systems missed." "Thank you, sir. I had good teachers." Later that evening, Jennifer secured a private communications booth for her weekly video call with the twins. At 7 years old, they were growing so quickly that each call revealed subtle changes: a new freckle, slightly longer limbs, vocabulary that expanded by leaps. "Mom, I won the math competition," Lucas announced before she could even say hello, his jade green eyes alight with excitement. "The whole school," Logan added proudly of his brother, "even against 8th graders." "That's amazing, sweetheart," Jennifer said, drinking in the sight of them. Lucas with his serious expression and meticulous way of speaking, Logan with his animated gestures and natural charisma. "I'm so proud of you both." Mrs. Montgomery appeared briefly in the frame. "Lucas solved a calculus problem that stumped the middle school math teacher," she reported. "The principal wants to discuss advanced placement options." After 20 minutes that passed too quickly, Jennifer blew kisses to her sons and promised to call again next week. As the screen went dark, the familiar ache of separation settled in her chest, a pain she had learned to carry alongside her pride and purpose. 2 days later, as Jennifer was completing her shift, a junior officer approached with a tablet. "Ma'am, thought you might want to see this. It's making rounds in the officers' mess." The screen showed a business news segment. Donovan Enterprises announces military technology division. Blake Donovan stood at a podium, still handsome at 35 despite lines beginning to form around his eyes. He spoke confidently about the company's new focus on defense contracts and cybersecurity solutions. "Protecting America's digital infrastructure is not just good business," he told the assembled press. "It's our patriotic duty." Jennifer handed the tablet back, her expression neutral. "Interesting pivot for a luxury development company." "Word is they're bidding on the new communications encryption contract," the officer added. "The one you consulted on last year." That night, Jennifer lay awake in her narrow bunk, thinking about life's strange symmetry. While Blake positioned himself to profit from military technology, she had become an expert in evaluating exactly the kind of systems his company would attempt to sell to the government. During her next shore leave, Jennifer flew directly to San Diego. The senator's driver met her at the airport, where Lucas and Logan waited impatiently beside the car, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom!" they shouted in unison as she approached, launching themselves at her with enough force to nearly topple her despite her military fitness. Jennifer dropped her duffel bag and knelt to embrace them properly, inhaling their scent. No longer babies, now distinctly boyish with hints of shampoo and the outdoors. "I've missed you so much," she whispered. At the Montgomery estate, Jennifer marveled at how confidently the twins navigated the space. This was their home in a way her various military housing assignments could never be. Lucas immediately showed her his latest coding project, a simple game he'd created that demonstrated remarkable logical thinking for a 7-year-old. Logan, meanwhile, pulled her to the garden to watch him practice his speech for the school assembly. "Grandpa Robert helped me with the big words," he explained, before launching into an impressively articulated presentation about ocean conservation. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Jennifer joined the Montgomerys in the study for tea, a ritual that had developed during her visits home. The school principal called again about Lucas, Mrs. Montgomery reported. "They want to accelerate him 2 grade levels in mathematics. We've held off making any decisions until you returned." "And Logan has been selected as class representative for the district public speaking competition," the senator added. "Youngest participant in 10 years. Jennifer felt a complex mix of pride and gratitude. "They're thriving because of you both. I couldn't provide this kind of stability alone." The senator cleared his throat. "Which brings us to something Elizabeth and I have been discussing." He exchanged glances with his wife. "We'd like to formally adopt the boys, Jennifer, not to diminish your role as their mother in any way, but to provide them with legal certainty and our name." "At 77, I'm not getting any younger," he continued. "This would ensure their future is secure, regardless of what happens to any of us." Jennifer set down her teacup, studying the faces of these two people who had become family in the truest sense. "You want them to be Hayes Montgomerys?" "Only with your blessing," Mrs. Montgomery assured her. "You would remain their mother in every way." As Jennifer considered the proposal, a memory surfaced, Blake's cold voice in the restaurant. "You clearly don't have what it takes to be a Donovan." How wrong he had been. Her sons would now carry a name far more respected than Donovan could ever be. a name earned through service and integrity rather than inheritance and cutthroat business practices. "Yes," she said finally. "I think that would be perfect for them, and for us." 3 months later, Jennifer stood in a San Diego courtroom beside the Montgomerys as a judge formalized the adoption. Lucas and Logan, dressed in matching navy blazers, seemed to understand the significance of the occasion despite their age. "Do you boys understand what's happening today?" the judge asked kindly. Logan, ever the spokesman, stepped forward. "We're getting Grandpa and Grandma's last name to go with Mom's and ours, so we'll be Hayes Montgomerys forever. And nobody can take us away if Mom has to go on her ship again," Lucas added pragmatically. The judge smiled. "That's exactly right." Later that evening, during the small celebration at the Montgomery home, Jennifer received a call from her commanding officer. Her shore leave was being cut short. She was needed back at the Pentagon for a classified cybersecurity matter. "I'm so sorry," she told the twins as she packed her bag the next morning. "Duty calls." "We understand, Mom," Lucas said seriously. "You protect the country." "Like a superhero," Logan added, "but with a computer instead of a cape." At the Pentagon, Jennifer was immediately pulled into a task force addressing a sophisticated cyber attack on military infrastructure. Her innovative approach to tracing the source earned her a commendation and the attention of senior military leadership. 6 months later, Jennifer received notification of her promotion to Major, a significant achievement for someone just 8 years into their military career. The accompanying assignment to lead a specialized cybersecurity unit represented the military's growing recognition of her expertise. The promotion ceremony coincided with the twins' 8th birthday. Jennifer stood tall in her dress uniform as the twins and the Montgomerys watched from the front row, pride evident on their faces as the new gold oak leaf was pinned to her shoulder. "Major Jennifer Hayes," the commanding officer announced, "your exemplary service and specialized skills have proven invaluable to national security." Later, at the modest celebration in the Officers' Club, Lucas presented her with a handmade card featuring a meticulously drawn Marine Corps emblem. "We calculated how many hours you've been protecting America," he explained, pointing to a number written inside. "It's a lot." Logan's gift was a speech, delivered with the natural confidence that continued to distinguish him from his more analytical twin. "Our mom doesn't just tell us to be brave," he told the assembled officers and family members. "She shows us every day." That night, after tucking the twins into bed in their temporary quarters on base, Jennifer found a business magazine in the lobby. Blake Donovan's face stared back from the cover alongside the headline, "Donovan's Digital Gambit, Tech Division Expansion Amid Personal Turmoil." The article detailed Donovan Enterprises' aggressive push into military technology contracts, while briefly mentioning Blake's second divorce and rumors of personal difficulties. A photograph showed him at a gala, looking prosperous but somehow hollow, surrounded by admirers but standing slightly apart. Jennifer studied the image, feeling neither satisfaction nor resentment, but a strange sense of distance, as though looking at a stranger from a past life. The man who had once seemed all-powerful now appeared smaller somehow, despite his continued wealth and influence. The following morning, as Jennifer prepared to return to her unit, she received a video call from the Montgomerys. The camera panned to show the twins playing chess with the senator in the garden, sunlight filtering through the trees, their laughter carrying clearly through the connection. "We thought you might like to see this before your flight," Mrs. Montgomery explained. "A little piece of home to take with you." Jennifer watched her sons, confident, secure, and thriving under the guidance of the family they had created together. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity what truly constituted a legacy. Not buildings or business empires, but the values instilled in the next generation. As she boarded her flight, Jennifer's phone buzzed with a news alert. "Donovan Enterprises under investigation for questionable lobbying practices in military contract bids." She silenced the notification without opening it, her thoughts already turning to the challenges awaiting her unit. As Jennifer rose through the military ranks and the twins flourished under the values she and the senator instilled in them, Blake Donovan began directing his company toward government contracts, unaware that his path would lead him directly to the woman he had once called insignificant. As Blake Donovan's face disappeared from the screen, Jennifer closed the news alert on her phone and focused on the mission briefing document in front of her. 5 years had passed since her promotion to major, and at 38, she had firmly established herself as one of the Marine Corps' foremost experts in cybersecurity defense systems. The manila folder before her contained the details of her newest assignment, leading a specialized unit dedicated to protecting America's most sensitive digital infrastructure. "Major Hayes Montgomery," said General Harrison, sliding another folder across the table, "your team's first priority. We've detected anomalous activity in 3 separate defense networks over the past month." Jennifer opened the folder, scanning the technical specifications with practiced efficiency. "Pattern recognition suggests a coordinated effort, sir, likely state-sponsored." "That's our assessment as well," the general confirmed. "We need your unit operational within 48 hours. Later that evening, Jennifer connected via secure video call to the Montgomery estate in Boston. The senator had relocated there 2 years earlier to be closer to specialized medical care after a minor stroke. At 12 years old, the twins had adapted to the move with characteristic resilience, quickly establishing themselves in their new elite preparatory school. "Mom!" Lucas called, his face appearing on screen. "I finished the algorithm I was telling you about. 98.3% accuracy in predictive encryption." Jennifer smiled at her son's enthusiasm. While most boys his age were obsessed with video games or sports, Lucas had developed an almost preternatural gift for mathematics and computer science. His school had long since abandoned trying to place him in age-appropriate classes. He now took advanced courses online through MIT's extension program. "That's impressive," Jennifer replied. "Have you run it against the standard security protocols?" "Better than NIST standards by 12%, Lucas confirmed, his jade-green eyes, so like Blake's, bright with intellectual excitement. Logan's face pushed into frame beside his brother's. "Mom, I made the finals in the National Debate Championship. Topic is ethical considerations in military technology deployment." Unlike his twin, Logan had channeled his intelligence into communication and leadership. Already captain of the debate team, unheard of for a 7th grader, he displayed a charisma and ethical clarity that reminded Jennifer of Senator Montgomery. "Congratulations. I'll try to get leave to attend," Jennifer promised, knowing her new assignment might make that impossible. The boys chatted for another 15 minutes, detailing school projects and social activities with the easy confidence of children who had never lacked for security or support. As they signed off, Senator Montgomery appeared on screen, his once robust frame noticeably thinner at 82, but his mind as sharp as ever. "They miss you," he said without preamble, "but they understand the importance of your work." "I miss them too," Jennifer admitted. "This new assignment will mean longer hours, possibly less predictable leave." The senator nodded. "Elizabeth and I will ensure they maintain their routine. Lucas has that mathematics competition in March and Logan's debate finals are in April." "I've noted both in my calendar," Jennifer assured him. "How's your health, Senator?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Doctors fussing about nothing. Blood pressure medication adjusted, that's all. Now tell me about this new unit you're leading. Anything you can share with an old political warhorse?" Jennifer smiled at his familiar deflection. Robert Montgomery had never been comfortable discussing his health, preferring to focus on work and family. "Cyber Defense Initiative, interagency cooperation. That's about all I can say on an open line." "Understood," he replied with a knowing nod. "Oh, before I forget, I saw something that might interest you professionally." He held up a business magazine. "Donovan Enterprises is making a major push into military cybersecurity contracts, claiming revolutionary new protection protocols." Jennifer's expression remained neutral, but something twisted in her stomach. "I'll keep an eye on the contract bids," she said evenly. After disconnecting, Jennifer opened her laptop and searched for recent news about Donovan Enterprises. Multiple articles detailed the company's aggressive expansion into defense technology under Blake's leadership. One photo showed him at a technology conference, standing beside a holographic display of their new security system. Despite his perfectly tailored suit and practiced smile, Jennifer noticed the subtle signs of strain, slight puffiness under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth suggesting stress or perhaps substance use. Another article from a less reputable source mentioned his third divorce and struggles with prescription medication following a skiing accident last year. Jennifer closed the browser, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy, just a distant recognition that while she had built something meaningful, Blake seemed to be losing his grip on the empire he'd prioritized above all else. 3 months into her new command, Jennifer was summoned to the Pentagon for an unexpected meeting. Admiral Wilson, head of Cyber Command, waited in a secure conference room with 3 other high-ranking officials. "Major Hayes Montgomery," the admiral began, "your team's analysis of the Donovan Enterprises security proposal has raised serious concerns." Jennifer straightened in her chair. "My analysis was purely technical, sir. The proposed system contains multiple vulnerabilities that could compromise sensitive networks." "We understand," said a silver-haired woman Jennifer recognized as the Undersecretary of Defense. "That's precisely why we're creating a formal ethics commission for cybersecurity contracts, and we want you to head it." The assignment was unprecedented, a major given authority to evaluate and approve multi-billion-dollar contracts typically reserved for general officers or civilian leadership. But Jennifer's unique combination of technical expertise, operational experience, and unimpeachable integrity made her the ideal candidate. That weekend, Jennifer flew to Boston for a rare 48-hour leave. The twins, now approaching their 13th birthdays, met her at Logan Airport with the senator's driver. "Mom, wait until you see what I've been working on," Lucas said as they drove toward Beacon Hill. "I've created a secure messaging algorithm that uses quantum-resistant encryption. And I won the Regional Ethics Bowl," Logan added, not to be outdone. "My argument on privacy rights in military surveillance systems received perfect scores." At the Montgomery townhouse, Jennifer watched her sons move through the elegant space with the easy confidence of young men who had never known insecurity. Lucas immediately retreated to his computer setup, a professional-grade system the senator had installed in what had once been a library. Logan settled at the dining room table to outline his next debate strategy, occasionally asking Jennifer pointed questions about military ethics that revealed sophisticated understanding of complex issues. Mrs. Montgomery joined Jennifer in the kitchen as she prepared tea, a habit Jennifer had adopted during her years in the service. "They're extraordinary boys," the older woman observed. "Lucas's math teacher says he's operating at graduate student level already. And Logan, well, Robert is convinced he's looking at a future in politics or law." "They've had extraordinary guidance," Jennifer replied, squeezing Mrs. Montgomery's hand in gratitude. Later that evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Jennifer sat with the senator in his study. Despite his age, he maintained a rigorous schedule of reading and correspondence, keeping his mind sharp even as his body began to fail him. "I've been thinking about legacy," he said, gazing at the photographs on his desk, most featuring the twins at various ages. "Not the buildings or laws that bear my name, but what truly matters." Jennifer followed his gaze to a recent photo of Lucas and Logan in their school blazers, their expressions serious yet somehow luminous with potential. "They're your legacy too, Jennifer," the senator continued. "The values you've instilled in them, service, integrity, intellectual courage, those will outlast any military decoration or political achievement." "I've had help," Jennifer replied softly. "You and Elizabeth have given them so much more than I could alone." The senator's eyes, still sharp despite his years, fixed on hers. "Have you ever told them about their father?" Jennifer stiffened slightly. "They know the basics, that he chose not to be part of our lives before they were born. They've never shown much interest in details." Boys become men, the senator observed. Men eventually question their origins more deeply. The following day, while helping Lucas with an advanced encryption problem, Jennifer noticed him studying her face with unusual intensity. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Lucas hesitated, his analytical mind visibly processing something complex. "Logan and I were talking last night after you went to sleep. We've never asked about our biological father." Jennifer set down the pencil she'd been using to annotate his code. "What would you like to know?" "Why has he never tried to find us?" Lucas asked, his question clinical rather than emotional, typical of his approach to all problems. Statistically, most absent fathers attempt contact at some point. From the doorway, Logan added, "We found our birth certificates online. They just say, 'Father unknown.' But that's not accurate, is it?" Jennifer took a deep breath. "No, it's not accurate. Your father's name is Blake Donovan. He is a businessman in New York. When I told him I was pregnant, he made it clear he wasn't interested in being a father." Logan's eyes, so like Blake's, narrowed slightly. "Donovan? As in Donovan Enterprises?" Of course they would make the connection immediately. Both boys followed business and technology news avidly. "Yes," Jennifer confirmed. "We were engaged briefly. When I told him about my Marine Corps acceptance and my pregnancy, he ended our relationship. He offered money for an abortion, not support." Lucas absorbed this information with characteristic detachment. "That explains our genetic predisposition for certain traits. His intelligence quotient must be statistically significant." Logan, always more attuned to emotional undercurrents, asked the question his brother wouldn't. "Did he hurt you badly?" Jennifer considered how to answer honestly without burdening them with adult complexities. "He taught me an important lesson about values and priorities. If he hadn't made the choice he did, I might never have built the life and career I have, and you might not have Grandpa Robert and Grandma Elizabeth." That evening, as Jennifer prepared to return to her unit, she found the twins waiting by the front door, a small gift box between them. "We got you something," Logan said, pushing the box toward her. Inside was a delicate silver compass pendant. "So you always find your way back to us," Lucas explained matter-of-factly. "And we added a microchip in the back with our coordinates," Logan added with a grin, "in case you forget where home is." Jennifer hugged them fiercely, these boys who had somehow grown so tall, so brilliant, so fundamentally good despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges that had shaped their early years. On the flight back to Washington, Jennifer opened her laptop to review contract proposals for her new commission. The Donovan Enterprises bid was on top, a $4 billion proposal for next-generation security protocols to protect military communications. As she began her methodical analysis, Jennifer reflected on the senator's words about legacy. Blake had chosen empire over family, profits over people. His legacy existed in steel and glass, stock prices and luxury properties. Hers lived in the bright minds and compassionate hearts of two extraordinary young men who were learning that true worth came not from wealth or power, but from service and integrity. While Jennifer built a reputation of unimpeachable integrity at the Pentagon, Donovan Enterprises intensified questionable business practices that would eventually put Blake on a collision course with the Ethics Commission led by the woman he had once deemed insignificant. While Jennifer built a reputation of unimpeachable integrity at the Pentagon, Donovan Enterprises intensified questionable business practices that would eventually put Blake on a collision course with the Ethics Commission led by the woman he had once deemed insignificant. The wheels of fate had been turning slowly for 15 years, and now they were about to complete their revolution. 3 years had passed since Jennifer's promotion to major. At 41, she commanded respect not merely from her rank but from her unparalleled expertise in cybersecurity defense systems. Her office at the Pentagon, though modest in size, reflected her methodical approach to life. Photographs of the twins arranged precisely on her desk, military commendations displayed without ostentation on the wall, and advanced technical manuals organized by subject on the bookshelf. A sharp knock interrupted her review of security protocols. General Richards entered without waiting for a response, his expression unusually animated for a man known for stoic command. "Major Hayes Montgomery, congratulations are in order," he announced, placing a folder on her desk. "You've been selected to chair the newly formed Commission on Ethics in Cybersecurity Contracts." Jennifer maintained her composure despite her surprise. "Thank you, sir. May I ask why me specifically?" "3 reasons," Richards replied, counting on his fingers. "Your technical expertise is unmatched in evaluating these systems. Your operational experience gives you practical insight civilian appointees lack. And most importantly," he paused meaningfully, "your integrity is beyond question. This commission will determine the recipients of contracts worth billions. We need someone incorruptible." The general explained that her first task would be evaluating proposals for a $4 billion contract to protect the nation's most sensitive military communications networks. 3 companies had been shortlisted after preliminary reviews. "The files are in there," Richards indicated the folder, "including Donovan Enterprises' bid." If he noticed Jennifer's slight intake of breath at the name, he gave no indication. That evening, Jennifer called the Montgomery residence in Boston. Lucas answered, his voice deeper than it had been even 3 months ago at her last visit. At 15, both twins were in the midst of adolescent growth spurts that transformed them weekly. "Mom, perfect timing. I just got the official MIT letter," Lucas announced without preamble. "Early admission confirmed for next fall. They're letting me start the advanced quantum computing track immediately." Jennifer felt pride swell in her chest. Her son, not yet 16, accepted to one of the world's premier technical institutions. "That's incredible, Lucas. I always knew you could do it." "It's primarily due to the encryption algorithm I developed," he explained matter-of-factly, his natural modesty preventing any hint of boasting. "Professor Keller says it has applications for national security." Logan's voice called from the background, and the phone changed hands. "Mom, guess what? My essay on ethical dimensions of military technology won the national competition. They're flying me to Washington next month for the award ceremony." "I'll be there," Jennifer promised immediately. "Send me the details." After chatting with both boys about their achievements, she spoke briefly with Senator Montgomery. At 85, his voice had grown frailer, but his mind remained razor-sharp. "They're becoming exceptional young men," he said with unmistakable pride. "Lucas was explaining his encryption method to me yesterday. Completely beyond my comprehension, but clearly brilliant." "And Logan?" Jennifer asked. "Reminds me of myself at that age, though considerably more articulate," the senator chuckled. "He's been selected as the youngest ever member of the Harvard pre-law summer program. The admissions director called me personally after reading his application essay." After ending the call, Jennifer opened the folder General Richards had left. 3 company profiles lay inside: TechGuard Solutions, Quantum Defense Systems, and Donovan Enterprises. She deliberately saved Blake's company for last, reviewing the other proposals with meticulous attention before finally allowing herself to examine the Donovan bid. The proposal was technically impressive. Blake had clearly hired top talent for his technology division. But something about the security architecture seemed familiar. Jennifer pulled up Lucas's recent research paper and compared the approaches. The similarity was unmistakable. Donovan's proposal incorporated principles remarkably similar to her son's published work, though without attribution. Jennifer made a neutral note in the margin and continued reading. The corporate profile included a photograph of Blake at 44, still handsome in that polished way that had once captivated her, though with new lines etched around his eyes and a certain hardness to his jaw that hadn't been there 15 years ago. He stood in front of the Donovan Enterprises headquarters, an imposing glass tower in downtown Manhattan, looking every inch the successful CEO. 3 days later, Jennifer was officially introduced as chair of the commission during a Pentagon press conference. She stood at the podium in her dress uniform, medals glinting under the camera lights, answering questions with the precise clarity that had become her trademark. "Major Hayes Montgomery, what criteria will guide the Commission's decisions?" asked a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. "Technical excellence, security integrity, and ethical business practices," she replied without hesitation. "Our job is to ensure that taxpayer dollars are invested in systems that will genuinely protect our nation's security interests, not merely enrich contractors." That evening, as Jennifer reviewed additional documents in her apartment, her phone rang with an unfamiliar Boston number. "Mom?" Logan's voice contained an unusual edge. "Something weird just happened. A man approached me after debate practice, asked if I was Logan Hayes Montgomery." Jennifer's military instincts immediately heightened. What did he look like? Suit, expensive watch, professional type, said he represented a technology firm interested in recruiting top students. Gave me his card and mentioned they're especially interested in students with natural aptitude for security systems. The card says Donovan Enterprises. Jennifer's grip tightened on the phone. "Did you tell him anything?" "Just that I'm not interested in technology careers. That's Lucas's area. He seemed more interested after I mentioned Lucas, asked about his MIT acceptance. I didn't like how he was fishing for information, so I left." "You did exactly right," Jennifer assured him, mind racing. It couldn't be coincidence. Not with Donovan Enterprises seeking the contract her commission was evaluating, and not with the proposal's similarities to Lucas's research. The following week brought another development. The Commission's preliminary investigation uncovered evidence of Donovan Enterprises attempting to influence the contract process through unofficial channels, expensive gifts to procurement officials, job offers to family members of key decision-makers, and strategic donations to politicians overseeing military appropriations. Jennifer documented each finding meticulously, ensuring that every potential conflict of interest was properly recorded. Her team, comprised of technical experts and ethics specialists, compiled a comprehensive report detailing both technical vulnerabilities in the Donovan proposal and the pattern of questionable influence attempts. 2 days before the Commission's preliminary findings were due, Jennifer received an invitation to the annual American Heroes Gala at the Mandarin Oriental, Boston, a high-profile charity event honoring military service and raising funds for veterans programs. As a decorated officer and the daughter of a veteran, Jennifer was occasionally invited to such functions, though she rarely attended. This invitation, however, came with a personal note from the event chair. "Major Hayes Montgomery, your presence would lend significant credibility to our efforts. Senator Montgomery has already confirmed his attendance with your sons, who will be recognized for their veterans support initiatives." Jennifer called Logan immediately. "You're being recognized at the Heroes Gala?" "Oh, that," Logan said casually. "It's for the Veterans Employment app I developed last summer. Connects vets with companies offering jobs matched to their military skills. No big deal." "No big deal?" Jennifer repeated, astounded by her son's modesty. "Logan, that's incredible." "Lucas helped with the algorithm," Logan added loyally, "and Grandpa Robert made some calls to get companies on board." That same day, Jennifer's assistant delivered a stack of updated files to her office. "The preliminary guest list for the American Heroes Gala arrived, ma'am. General Richards thought you should review it since you'll be representing the commission." Jennifer scanned the list of political figures, military officers, and corporate sponsors. Halfway down, a name jumped out. Blake Donovan, CEO, Donovan Enterprises, platinum-level sponsor. She set the paper down carefully, controlling her reaction with the discipline of years of military service. Of course, Blake would attend. His company was aggressively pursuing military contracts. Sponsoring veterans events was standard corporate strategy. For the first time in 15 years, Jennifer would be in the same room with the man who had abandoned her and their unborn children. The man whose company she was now investigating. The man who had no idea that the twins he had rejected, the anchors he couldn't be bothered with, had grown into extraordinary young men with his eyes and none of his ethical failings. The evening before the gala, Jennifer flew to Boston. The Montgomery townhouse on Beacon Hill welcomed her with warmth and light against the November chill. Lucas and Logan greeted her at the door, both nearly as tall as she was now, dressed in identical navy blazers for a school function they'd just attended. "Mom!" Logan embraced her first, always the more demonstrative twin. "Wait until you see what Lucas figured out about the quantum encryption problem MIT has been working on." Lucas rolled his eyes at his brother's enthusiasm but couldn't hide his own excitement. "Professor Keller says it could revolutionize secure communications if I can solve the latency issue." As they moved into the living room, Jennifer was struck again by how much the twins resembled Blake physically. The same jade-green eyes, the same strong jaw beginning to emerge as adolescence stripped away childhood softness. Yet everything else about them, their values, their kindness, their intellectual integrity, came from a different source entirely. "Your uniforms for tomorrow arrived," Mrs. Montgomery announced, indicating garment bags hanging in the hallway. "The tailor made the adjustments you requested." The next morning, Jennifer stood before the mirror in her dress uniform, the weight of her medals and ribbons telling the story of her extraordinary career. 15 years of service, 2 combat deployments, and numerous commendations for her work in cybersecurity. Lucas knocked on her door, already dressed in his formal suit. "Mom, you look like a superhero with all those medals." "Just a person doing her job," Jennifer replied with a modest smile, adjusting her short military haircut. "A job where you literally save the world," Logan added, appearing behind his brother and checking his smartwatch. "We need to leave in 10 minutes to arrive before the photographers." Jennifer studied her sons, now almost men, and felt a wave of pride so intense it momentarily took her breath away. In the rare moments when she thought of Blake now, it was with an odd sense of gratitude. His abandonment had been the catalyst for the extraordinary life she had built. What she didn't know was that across the city, Blake Donovan was adjusting his $1,200 Brioni tie in his presidential suite, reviewing notes about Major Hayes Montgomery, the woman who could determine his company's future, making no connection whatsoever to the Jennifer he had abandoned years ago. The Mandarin Oriental Boston gleamed with elegant opulence, its grand ballroom transformed for the American Heroes Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with arrangements of white roses and blue hydrangeas, while discreet American flag motifs added patriotic dignity without ostentation. Military officers in dress uniforms mingled with politicians in formal attire and corporate executives in designer suits, creating a sea of power and influence contained within the hotel's gilded walls. Jennifer stepped out of the limousine provided by the event organizers, flanked by Lucas and Logan. The twins moved with the easy confidence of young men accustomed to prestigious settings, despite their youth. Senator Montgomery followed, leaning slightly on a silver-headed cane, his posture still commanding respect despite his 85 years. "Major Hayes Montgomery," greeted Admiral Wilson, approaching as soon as they entered the reception area. "An honor to have you here tonight. These must be the remarkable young men I've heard so much about." "Admiral Wilson, may I present Lucas and Logan Hayes Montgomery," Jennifer replied with quiet pride. Logan extended his hand with practiced ease. "A pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you for your service." Lucas followed suit, his handshake firm and direct. "Admiral, I read your paper on integrated communication systems last month. Fascinating application of redundant protocols." The Admiral raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by the teenager's knowledge. "You understood that? Most of my junior officers required 3 briefings to grasp the concept." As they moved deeper into the gathering, Jennifer was greeted with respect by officers of various branches, political figures, and defense contractors who recognized her position on the commission. For many years, she had avoided such events, preferring the directness of military operations to the subtle maneuvering of Washington society. But tonight was different. Her sons were being recognized, and her professional responsibilities required her presence. Across the room, Blake Donovan navigated the crowd with practiced charm, pausing to shake hands with a senator whose committee oversaw defense appropriations. At 44, Blake still possessed the magnetic presence that had once captivated Jennifer. His custom-tailored tuxedo hung perfectly on his frame, and his trademark confidence remained intact, though subtle signs of strain showed around his eyes. "That contract is practically secured," assured Thomas Reynolds, Blake's chief government relations officer, keeping his voice low as they moved between conversations. "We've made all the right connections." Blake nodded absently, scanning the room. "Where is this Major Hayes Montgomery? Everyone says she's the key decision-maker on the commission. She should be here tonight. Distinguished service record, cybersecurity specialist, impeccable reputation for integrity. Might be our toughest sell," Reynolds admitted, consulting his phone. According to the program, she'll be making opening remarks in about 15 minutes. "Perfect," Blake replied, accepting a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. "I want to observe her before making an approach. Understanding people's motivations is how I've built this company." The gentle chime of crystals signaled the formal start of the evening. Guests began moving toward their assigned tables, consulting discreet place cards. Jennifer and her family were seated at the head table, a position of honor befitting her role and the twins' recognition. "Major Hayes Montgomery will open our program with remarks on integrity and military service," announced the Master of Ceremonies, a retired general now heading the Veterans Foundation hosting the event. Jennifer rose and approached the podium with military precision, her dress uniform immaculate, medals and ribbons catching the light. Behind her on the large screen appeared her official military portrait alongside her name and rank. At that moment, Blake was engaged in conversation with the senator, champagne glass halfway to his lips. His peripheral vision caught the name on the screen, and he turned automatically, a seasoned executive accustomed to monitoring room dynamics. "Jennifer?" The name escaped his lips as recognition dawned, champagne sloshing over the rim of his glass onto his hand and the cuff of his tuxedo. The senator glanced at him curiously. "You know Major Hayes Montgomery?" Blake didn't answer, transfixed by the woman at the podium. This poised, decorated officer bore little resemblance to the heartbroken young woman he'd last seen at 11 Madison Park 15 years ago. Her hair, once long and flowing, was now cut in a precise military style that emphasized her striking bone structure. Her posture radiated authority and confidence as she addressed the gathering. "Distinguished guests, fellow service members, it is my honor to welcome you to the American Heroes Gala," Jennifer began, her voice clear and commanding. "Tonight we celebrate not only those who wear the uniform, but the values that inspire service, integrity, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to principles greater than ourselves." Blake watched, momentarily paralyzed, as her gaze swept the room during her speech. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. He saw the flicker of recognition, so brief anyone else would have missed it, before her expression returned to professional composure without missing a word of her address. "She knows me," he thought with certainty, though her performance gave no indication of their shared history. As Jennifer concluded her remarks to appreciative applause, Blake turned to Reynolds. "I need everything you have on Major Hayes Montgomery. Now." Reynolds tapped rapidly on his tablet. "Decorated cybersecurity expert, 2 combat deployments, master's degree from MIT completed during service. Considered the Pentagon's leading authority on digital defense systems. Rumors say the president is considering her for future chief of cyber operations." Blake barely registered these details, his attention fixed on Jennifer as she returned to her table where 2 teenage boys in formal attire rose slightly at her approach, a gesture of respect that spoke to careful upbringing. "Those boys with her?" Blake asked, his voice unnaturally tight. "Who are they?" Reynolds consulted his tablet again. "Her sons, apparently. Twins. They're being recognized tonight for creating some kind of veterans employment app. Supposed to be brilliant kids. One's already accepted to MIT at 15, the other some kind of public speaking prodigy. Blake's fingers tightened around his champagne flute as he studied the boys more carefully. Even from across the room, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same jade-green eyes that had stared back at him from mirrors his entire life now gazed out from two youthful faces that bore subtle echoes of his own features. "Reynolds," Blake said, his voice strained. "Find out everything about those boys. Everything." During the dinner service, Blake found himself unable to focus on the conversations around him. His gaze repeatedly drifted to the head table where Jennifer sat between the twins, occasionally leaning in to hear something one of them said, her smile warm in a way he had never seen during their brief engagement. An older man beside them, Senator Montgomery, Blake realized belatedly, recognizing the long-time political figure, spoke animatedly to the boys who listened with evident respect. They looked like a family, a real family, bonded by something deeper than the genetic connection that Blake was now certain existed. When the formal program paused for dessert, Blake excused himself from his table and made his way deliberately toward Jennifer, who stood conversing with a general near the edge of the dance floor. "Major Hayes Montgomery," he said, inserting himself into a brief pause in their conversation. "Blake Donovan of Donovan Enterprises. I believe we've met a long time ago." Jennifer turned to him with a smile that was perfectly professional and completely devoid of personal warmth. "Mr. Donovan. Yes, our paths crossed briefly in New York, if I recall correctly." Her tone could have been addressing any former acquaintance from years past. The general, sensing something in the atmosphere, excused himself tactfully. "You look well, Jennifer," Blake said, dropping the formality once they were relatively alone. "Military life clearly agrees with you." "Major Hayes Montgomery," she corrected gently but firmly. "And yes, service to country has been rewarding." Before Blake could respond, the twins approached, moving with the coordinated awareness of siblings accustomed to watching out for each other. "Mom, Admiral Wilson was asking about the encryption protocol," the slightly taller one said, then noticed Blake with the subtle wariness of a perceptive teenager. "Lucas? Logan?" Jennifer said, her voice warming immediately. "This is Mr. Blake Donovan of Donovan Enterprises. Mr. Donovan, my sons, Lucas and Logan Hayes Montgomery." The boys extended their hands with impeccable manners, showing no sign of recognition at his name. Blake felt a strange sensation as he shook hands with them, these strangers who carried his blood, who had his eyes, who had grown for 15 years without his knowledge. "Impressive to meet you both," Blake managed, studying their faces with an intensity that bordered on inappropriate. "I understand one of you has been accepted to MIT already?" "That would be me," Lucas replied with quiet confidence. "Early admission to the quantum computing program." "And you're quite the orator," Blake said to Logan, recalling Reynolds's brief notes. "I enjoy debate and advocacy," Logan responded, his tone polite but reserved, particularly regarding veterans' rights and ethical technology deployment. "Remarkable achievements for your age," Blake said, unable to keep a note of wonder from his voice. These were his sons, clearly brilliant, poised, articulate, complete strangers who carried forward his genetic gifts while being shaped by someone else's values. "If you'll excuse us," Jennifer interjected smoothly, "we need to discuss the details of tomorrow's presentation with the committee." As she guided the twins away, Blake impulsively reached out, his fingers lightly grasping her elbow. "Jennifer, we need to talk. About everything." She looked pointedly at his hand on her arm, her expression cooling to near glacial temperatures. "We have nothing to discuss, Mr. Donovan. Your words at Manhattan were quite conclusive at the time." The twins glanced between them with subtle shifts in expression, Logan's eyes narrowing slightly in sudden comprehension, Lucas observing with analytical detachment. As Jennifer moved away with perfect composure, Blake remained rooted in place, watching the three of them rejoin Senator Montgomery at their table. The elderly statesman placed a protective hand on Logan's shoulder, leaning in to ask something that made both boys smile. During the remainder of the dinner, Blake observed Jennifer's interactions from across the room. Her obvious pride in her sons, the easy affection between them, the respect accorded to her by military and political leaders alike, all formed a picture of a life successfully built without him, despite him, in defiance of his cruel dismissal 15 years ago. When the time came for the award presentations, Jennifer returned to the podium to announce the recipients of the Young Patriots Award. Blake watched as she introduced her own sons with professional detachment, though her eyes betrayed maternal pride as Lucas and Logan joined her on stage. Logan stepped to the microphone, his poise remarkable for a 15-year-old. "We created the Veterans Transition Initiative because we believe those who serve deserve our support long after their uniforms are hung up," he explained, his articulation flawless. "Our mother taught us that service doesn't end with deployment. It's a lifetime commitment to values larger than ourselves." As the audience applauded, Blake felt an unaccustomed emotion rising in his chest, something like regret, but sharper, more acute. These boys, who should have carried the Donovan name, instead embodied values he had dismissed as insignificant when he'd abandoned their mother. While Blake watched Jennifer and her sons, his sons, accepting congratulations from admirers, Reynolds approached with his tablet. "Sir, I have that information you wanted. The boys are 15 years old, their birth certificates list father unknown, and they were legally adopted by Senator Robert Montgomery and his wife 8 years ago, though Jennifer Hayes retained primary parental rights. They're registered as Lucas and Logan Hayes Montgomery." Blake absorbed this information without responding, his gaze fixed on the family he hadn't known existed until tonight. The realization dawned with crushing clarity. While he had been building his empire of glass and steel, Jennifer had created something far more valuable, a family founded on principles that would outlast any corporate legacy. As Jennifer guided her sons through the crowd, Blake observed how admirers naturally gravitated toward them, not merely because of their connection to her, but because of their own emerging excellence. The magnitude of what he had carelessly discarded 15 years ago settled onto his shoulders with the weight of mountains. While Blake observed Jennifer and the twins from across the room, he didn't realize that the true blow would come the following morning, when his company would face the justice he never believed existed. While Blake observed Jennifer and the twins from across the room, he felt an unfamiliar hollowness expanding in his chest. Something fundamental had shifted in his world, a revelation that would pale in comparison to what awaited him the following morning. The sun had barely risen when Blake's phone erupted with notifications. Half awake in his presidential suite, he reached for the device, expecting the usual morning market updates. Instead, his screen displayed a cascade of alarming headlines. Breaking: Donovan Enterprises disqualified from $4 billion military contract. Pentagon Ethics Commission cites serious vulnerabilities in Donovan systems. Major Hayes Montgomery announces Donovan Enterprises elimination from security bid. Blake sat bolt upright, sleep instantly banished. He jabbed the call button for Reynolds, his government relations director. "What the hell is happening?" he demanded when Reynolds answered, panic evident in his subordinate's voice. "Sir, it's bad. The Ethics Commission released their preliminary findings an hour ago. We've been completely eliminated from consideration. The other two companies remain in the running." Blake switched his phone to speaker and pulled up the official Pentagon press release. Major Jennifer Hayes Montgomery's statement was clinical in its precision. After rigorous technical and ethical evaluation, the Commission has determined that Donovan Enterprises' proposed security architecture contains critical vulnerabilities that could compromise sensitive military communications. Furthermore, our investigation uncovered concerning patterns of attempted influence that violate procurement protocols. Complete findings will be published in tomorrow's comprehensive report. Blake's hands shook as he scrolled through financial sites. Donovan Enterprises' stock had plummeted 23% in pre-market trading and continued to fall as regular trading opened. "Get me a car to the Pentagon immediately," he ordered Reynolds. "I need to speak to Hayes Montgomery personally." "Sir, that might not be advisable given the circumstances. "Just do it," Blake snapped, ending the call. As his driver navigated morning traffic toward the Pentagon, Blake rehearsed arguments and counter-arguments, strategies for salvaging the situation. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members, major investors, and his executive team, all demanding explanations he couldn't provide. When he arrived at the Pentagon, Blake was directed to a small conference room where Jennifer was scheduled to give a press briefing. He slipped in just as she approached the podium, her uniform impeccable, her posture straight as steel. "Major Hayes Montgomery will take a few questions following her statement," announced a Pentagon press officer. Jennifer looked out at the assembled journalists with calm authority. "Good morning. As stated in our preliminary report, the Commission on Ethics in Cybersecurity Contracts has eliminated Donovan Enterprises from consideration for the Integrated Communications Security Contract. Our comprehensive evaluation identified multiple critical vulnerabilities in their proposed architecture that could potentially compromise classified communications." A reporter raised his hand. "Major, can you elaborate on the nature of these vulnerabilities?" "The full technical assessment will be included in tomorrow's report," Jennifer replied. "In simple terms, the encryption protocols proposed by Donovan Enterprises contained backdoor vulnerabilities that could permit unauthorized access to secured communications." "And the ethical concerns mentioned in your statement?" asked another journalist. Jennifer's expression remained neutral. "Our investigation documented multiple instances of attempted improper influence, including lavish gifts to procurement officials, job offers to family members of key decision-makers, and targeted donations to oversight committee members." Blake felt the blood drain from his face. These were standard business practices in his world, strategic relationship building he'd always called it, now characterized as ethical violations by the woman he had once abandoned. As the briefing concluded, Blake pushed through the departing journalists to intercept Jennifer. "Major Hayes Montgomery," he called, loud enough to make heads turn. "This decision is completely unjustified. Our systems have been independently verified." Jennifer turned, regarding him with professional detachment. "Mr. Donovan, I suggest you review the full report when it's released tomorrow. Every finding is meticulously documented." "This is personal and you know it," Blake hissed, stepping closer. The room fell silent as reporters sensed a developing story. Several pulled out phones to record the confrontation. Jennifer's expression didn't change. "Mr. Donovan, all decisions by this commission are based solely on technical merit and ethical compliance. If you have specific objections to our findings, I recommend consulting with your legal team before making unfounded accusations." "You've wanted revenge for 15 years, Blake said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Now you've found it." "Revenge would require emotional investment, Mr. Donovan," Jennifer replied evenly. "My commission simply evaluated your company's proposal against established criteria. It failed to meet those standards." Before Blake could respond, the elevator doors opened, revealing Logan and Lucas with Senator Montgomery. They had apparently come to meet Jennifer following the briefing. Logan assessed the situation instantly, his perceptive gaze moving between his mother and Blake. With the political instinct of someone 3 times his age, he approached the microphone Jennifer had just vacated. "Major," he asked clearly, "Mr. Donovan seems to be suggesting some conflict of interest. Is there something the commission hasn't disclosed?" All eyes turned to Jennifer, then Blake, then back to Jennifer. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. If Blake pursued his accusation, he would force Jennifer to publicly acknowledge their past. "No undisclosed conflict, Lieutenant Logan," Jennifer answered formally, using his honorary ROTC title. "Mr. Donovan and I briefly knew each other in New York before you were born, but we've had no contact that would require disclosure to the Ethics Committee." Blake realized too late the corner he'd backed himself into. The message was unmistakable. He was so irrelevant to Jennifer's life that their prior relationship didn't even merit official acknowledgement. As murmurs spread through the assembled press corps, Blake retreated, aware that he had just made a difficult situation catastrophically worse. By afternoon, the stock price of Donovan Enterprises had fallen 47%. The board called an emergency meeting, and Blake spent 3 grueling hours defending decisions he could barely remember making, strategies implemented by subordinates he'd incentivized to win at any cost. That evening, Blake sat alone in his hotel room, tumbler of scotch in hand, watching Jennifer's CNN interview. She explained the commission's findings with unassailable technical precision, her credibility enhanced by her military bearing and evident expertise. "This isn't about personalities," she stated when the interviewer delicately probed about the confrontation with Blake. "It's about national security. The systems protecting our critical infrastructure cannot have the vulnerabilities we identified." Blake's phone rang, his private investigator. "Mr. Donovan, I have the information you requested about the Hayes-Montgomery twins." The report was a litany of achievements that twisted the knife deeper with each detail. Logan had created a veterans employment app that had helped thousands of former military personnel find suitable work. Lucas had developed an encryption algorithm that had received recognition from MIT's top cryptographers. Both were full scholarship students at elite preparatory schools, volunteers for multiple causes, and on track for admission to the nation's most prestigious universities. These were his sons, his biological legacy, thriving spectacularly without his name, his money, or his influence. Impulsively, Blake ordered his driver to take him to the Mandarin Oriental, where he knew Jennifer and the twins were staying one more night before returning to their respective posts. In the elegant lobby, he waited until he spotted them emerging from the elevator, dressed for an evening engagement. "Jennifer, we need to talk," he insisted, blocking their path. The twins immediately positioned themselves protectively on either side of their mother, while Senator Montgomery observed with keen interest several steps behind. "I believe we have nothing further to discuss, Mr. Donovan," Jennifer replied, her composure unruffled. "They're my sons," Blake whispered urgently. "I have a right to know them." A flicker of confusion passed across the twins' faces. Logan, with his quick perception, narrowed his eyes in sudden understanding. "Right?" Jennifer finally allowed genuine emotion to color her voice. "You rejected that right when you threw money on a table for an abortion and called me insignificant." Blake paled. "I was young, too ambitious. I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake is not something that lasts 15 years, Mr. Donovan," Jennifer responded. "It's a continuous choice." Senator Montgomery stepped forward. "Blake Donovan, I believe I met you when you attempted to influence the Budget Committee against technology regulations. Impressive how patterns of behavior persist." Logan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Let me understand. You're our biological father? The man who abandoned our mother when she was pregnant?" Blake attempted a smile. "The circumstances were complicated." "Not for us," Lucas interrupted, his analytical mind cutting through pretense. "Our life is very clear. We have a mother who sacrificed everything for us, and a grandfather who showed us what integrity means." Jennifer touched her son's shoulders. "This conversation doesn't need to happen in a hotel lobby. If you want to know more, we can discuss it properly later." "Actually, I'm not particularly interested," Logan replied with surprising maturity. "Though perhaps a DNA test might be prudent for medical purposes. And maybe to ensure he doesn't attempt some legal maneuver to approach us now that he's lost $1 billion contract," Lucas added pragmatically. Blake felt the sting of their calculated indifference, so similar to his own coldness 15 years ago. "You are my legacy, my blood," he insisted desperately. Jennifer smiled for the first time. "No, Blake. They are your DNA, but they are the legacy of the values Robert and I taught them. Service, integrity, courage." As they walked away, Blake remained rooted in place, watching the family he could have had disappear through the hotel's revolving door. In their straight backs and confident strides, he saw the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just a woman and children, but the chance to be part of something genuine in a life filled with hollow acquisitions. While Blake stood alone in the hotel lobby, investors around the world were selling off their Donovan Enterprises holdings, dismantling in hours the empire he had prioritized over family 15 years ago. The price of his choice, deferred for so long, had finally come due with compound interest. While Jennifer built her extraordinary career and raised sons who embodied the values she cherished, Blake had constructed a business empire with a foundation as fragile as his own character. Now, as both began to collapse simultaneously, he finally understood the true meaning of the word insignificant. 6 months passed, like the slow turning of seasons, transforming landscapes both external and internal. While Jennifer's career soared to new heights with her promotion to lieutenant colonel, Blake Donovan watched his carefully constructed world crumble into dust. The morning after the disastrous confrontation at the Mandarin Oriental, Jennifer had awakened to dozens of congratulatory messages about her commission's integrity. Military leadership, impressed by her handling of the Donovan Enterprises disqualification, fast-tracked her promotion and offered her leadership of a new pentagonal division dedicated to evolving cybersecurity threats. Blake, meanwhile, had awakened to financial catastrophe. The comprehensive report Jennifer's commission published detailed not only the technical vulnerabilities in Donovan's systems, but also documented years of questionable business practices. Other government agencies began reviewing all existing Donovan contracts, and private sector clients started migrating to competitors. "The board is calling for your resignation," Blake's chief counsel informed him during a tense meeting in the company's Manhattan headquarters. "They're suggesting a graceful exit before the shareholders' meeting next week." Blake stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, watching snow drift past the glass, an echo of that night 15 years ago when Jennifer had stood in his penthouse, admiring the view she would soon lose along with everything else. "I built this company," he said, his voice hollow. "My father may have started it, but I transformed it." "And now the transformation is working in reverse," his counsel replied bluntly. "We've lost 62% of our market value in 3 weeks. Major investors are dumping shares. The Pentagon contract was supposed to be our cornerstone for the next decade." 2 weeks later, Blake cleared out his office, the Donovan name already removed from his door. The board had appointed an interim CEO, a veteran executive known for corporate turnarounds, and relegated Blake to a ceremonial chairman position with no operational authority. As April bloomed across the East Coast, Jennifer flew to Annapolis with Logan, who had been invited to tour the Naval Academy. At 15, he was still too young to apply, but his exceptional record had caught the attention of recruitment officers eager to cultivate future talent. "What do you think?" Jennifer asked as they walked the historic grounds, spring breeze carrying the scent of the Chesapeake Bay. Logan considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I'm thinking about following your path, Mom. Not necessarily the Marines specifically, but service of some kind." Jennifer felt a swell of pride that momentarily stole her breath. "Your father, Senator Montgomery, would be proud." "He already is," Logan replied with a smile. "He calls me every morning to check if I've made any world-changing decisions overnight." The senator's health had stabilized after his last minor stroke, but at 85, his mortality had become an unspoken concern. He had insisted, however, on continuing his role as the twins' moral compass and historical teacher. "And Lucas?" Jennifer asked. "Have you two discussed different paths for the first time?" The twins had always moved in parallel, their differences complementary rather than divergent, but their distinct talents were naturally pulling them towards separate futures. "He's all in on MIT," Logan confirmed. "The quantum computing project has basically consumed his entire existence. But we've talked about it, how we might serve in different ways but toward the same ideals." In New York, Blake sat alone in his drastically downsized apartment in Murray Hill, his Upper East Side penthouse sold to cover margin calls when Donovan Enterprises stock collapsed. The television played a special report, The Hayes Montgomery family, a new chapter in American service. The camera panned across a portrait of Jennifer in her new lieutenant colonel uniform, the twins in formal attire flanking her, and Senator Montgomery seated in front, their faces radiating strength and unity. The reporter's voiceover praised Jennifer's journey from single motherhood to military leadership, framing her story as an American triumph of perseverance. There was no mention of Blake Donovan. On the coffee table before him lay bankruptcy paperwork, the final surrender of his personal financial empire. Desperate attempts to prop up Donovan Enterprises with his own resources had backfired spectacularly when the company failed to secure any significant new contracts in the wake of the Pentagon disqualification. He picked up the pen, then set it down again, unable to complete this final acknowledgement of failure. His phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. Board meeting moved up. Dissolution vote tomorrow. Blake closed his eyes, remembering the day he had taken over as CEO, the youngest in company history, determined to transform his father's modest real estate firm into a diversified corporate powerhouse. He had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, sacrificing everything personal on the altar of ambition. People like us don't sacrifice ambitions for children. They're anchors for people with vision, he had told Jennifer with cold certainty. The irony was poisonous. His ambition had ultimately been the anchor that drowned him, while Jennifer's commitment to her children had become the foundation of her extraordinary rise. 1 month later, in a law office in Boston, Lucas and Logan sat across from Blake for their first and only formal meeting arranged by attorneys after Logan had indeed suggested a DNA test for medical records. The results confirm paternity at 99.8% probability, the lawyer stated neutrally. Logan, dressed in a blazer that emphasized his emerging adult frame, nodded without surprise. "Thank you for agreeing to the test, Mr. Donovan. It's useful for our medical history." "You could have that history directly from me," Blake offered, trying to keep desperation from his voice. "I'd like to be part of your lives." Lucas, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "I've conducted a probability analysis of successful relationship formation given our circumstances. The variables aren't favorable." "What my brother means," Logan translated with a slight smile, "is that we don't share fundamental values, and given our academic commitments, we don't see utility in investing time in a forced relationship." The clinical rejection, delivered in language that echoed Blake's own pragmatic worldview, struck him like a physical blow. These boys, who carried his genetic material, had developed minds that could dissect and dismiss him with the same cold efficiency he had once applied to their mother. "I've made mistakes," Blake admitted, an uncharacteristic vulnerability in his voice, "but I'm still your father." "Biologically," Lucas agreed, "but Senator Montgomery fulfilled the paternal role during our formative years. Our psychological attachment and value structure were established long before this meeting." Blake looked at these young men, nearly adults, and saw not just his eyes reflected back, but aspects of his analytical mind, his strategic thinking. Yet they had applied these inherited gifts to entirely different purposes, guided by Jennifer and the senator towards service rather than self-interest. "Could we at least maintain some contact?" Blake asked, hating the pleading note in his voice. "Periodic updates, perhaps?" Logan exchanged glances with his brother before responding. "We'll consider it, though I should note that we're both entering intensive academic periods that limit our availability." The meeting concluded with formal handshakes and no promises. As Blake watched them leave, he realized they had handled him exactly as he might have handled a business acquaintance seeking an unwanted connection, with polite efficiency and clear boundaries. 2 months later, Jennifer stood in her new office at the Pentagon, the window overlooking the Potomac River. Her new team would report directly to her, tasked with developing next-generation security protocols for military and critical infrastructure systems. "Colonel Hayes Montgomery?" Her assistant appeared at the door. "Your sons are on line 1. They say it's important." Jennifer picked up the phone, instantly alert. "Lucas? Logan? Is everything all right?" "Better than all right," Lucas replied. Remember that encryption algorithm I've been developing? MIT is submitting it for patent protection. They're calling it a breakthrough in quantum-resistant security. And my Veterans Employment Platform just received federal funding for nationwide expansion, Logan added, clearly on another extension. The White House wants to incorporate it into the official transition program for all service members. Pride swelled in Jennifer's chest as she listened to her son's achievements, each one a testament to values she had instilled through example rather than instruction. After the call, she opened her desk drawer and removed a faded photograph, the only one she had kept from her time with Blake. It showed them at a charity gala, his arm possessively around her waist, her smile uncertain despite the glamorous setting. Jennifer studied the image of her younger self, a woman who had believed her value was determined by a man's assessment and felt a profound disconnect. That uncertain girl had vanished, replaced by a leader who measured her worth through service and integrity. She returned the photograph to the drawer, a relic of a past life that no longer defined her. In his Murray Hill apartment, Blake watched a news segment about a revolutionary encryption system developed by teenage prodigy Lucas Hayes Montgomery. The camera showed Lucas explaining complex mathematical concepts with confidence beyond his years, while Logan stood nearby, fielding questions about ethical applications of the technology. Blake's phone rang, his attorney with the final news. The remnants of Donovan Enterprises had been acquired by a competitor. The Donovan name would be phased out within 6 months. The dynasty his grandfather had founded, that his father had built, and that he had expanded, would disappear from the corporate landscape as if it had never existed. As he signed the last bankruptcy forms that evening, Blake finally understood what Jennifer had built in the years after he had discarded her. Not just a career, not just a family, but a legacy of substance. While he had pursued wealth and status, she had cultivated something far more valuable: lives guided by purpose. Jennifer, meanwhile, watched her sons with quiet contentment as they debated the ethical implications of autonomous security systems over dinner at the senator's home. Her victory had never been about defeating Blake. It had been about overcoming the fear and insecurity he had once embodied in her life. She had constructed not only an extraordinary career but a family grounded in real values, the true legacy that no magnate could ever purchase. Years later, when Lucas and Logan graduated with honors from the nation's most prestigious universities, following their mother's footsteps of integrity, an older man watched discreetly from the last row. Blake Donovan had finally understood that true legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in the values that remain when everything else disappears. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.